Welcome to Charts Today. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Wednesday, the 3rd of July, comes to you from London. And we saw the markets rising this week on trade hopes after the G20 summit, and that has basically continued. We're seeing the dollar just pausing for breath, having had a good start to the week. Still bullish on the on the long and short-term charts, but the medium term has turned quite bearish, and we've got downside targets on the short-term chart now. Remembering this is my weekly, my daily, and my 60-minute, my 1% point and figure, my 0.5%, and my 0.1% 60-minute point and figure. So this is my long-term, my medium-term, and my short-term view of the market. Taking a look at the euro, we see that the euro has actually fallen against that dollar rise, and we're testing new weekly lows here. Medium term, we've made the transition, the inverse of what we're seeing on the dollar, but long term, we're still bearish on the euro. And looking at the yen, we see that the dollar yen chart is actually just falling away here. So yen is normally an indication of where we see the dollar going next. So just seeing a bit of a sell-off. Sterling falling against the dollar, sitting at 125.60, really looking like it might test some new lows. Really not that far away from 2-year lows for sterling, and we've got a downside target to 125. So that's where we've been playing towards. On the medium-term chart, 123, and we've activated downside targets to parity. So a lot of uncertainty still surrounding sterling. Against the euro, we're seeing sterling relatively flat. We've seen quite a long sort of seesawing in the last 2 years since Brexit. Medium term, we are just gradually falling away, so weaker sterling is a factor. Against the Swiss franc, 124. So we are seeing more of a sell-off here, bearish on all three charts. And against the Aussie dollar, also looking 179, so just looking weaker there as well. Bitcoin back above the $10,000 mark. We had a little bit of a move yesterday below $10,000, but we're back to 11,400 this morning. So there seems to be an appetite when Bitcoin dips to buy more. We're seeing 12,000 as a short-term target. If we make new highs on Bitcoin, $36,000 is the target. So that thrust that we've seen here indicates a much higher move if we can make new highs. The S&P 500 index was up yesterday. It's been relatively flat the last week or so, but it is just holding that all-time high territory. And the Nasdaq not quite getting yet to all-time high territory, but also looking quite strong as well. The Dow has still more work to do to break out here, but again, it's nudging that resistance level. The Russell 2000, the broader-based index, we are seeing is improving, but again, it has a lot more work to do. So this is a breadth indicator for the market, really, that the broader-based market is yet to make new highs. The futures this morning, we're seeing the S&P future down very slightly, the Nasdaq future up, so very hard to call. The market looks set to open fairly flat. The UK market is up 1/3% this morning. We're seeing the break here, looking pretty positive, and on the long-term chart, breaking into new all-time territory. Well, breaking into bullish territory again. So we are just seeing the UK market looking pretty strong on the top 100. On the mid-caps, we're also seeing that push higher as well. So quite interesting that we're seeing that there. The German market is up 1/3% this morning, also looking quite strong. Not quite through on the long-term chart. And the CAC 40 is up also, bullish on all three time frames. Japan was down 0.7% overnight, so we are just seeing a little bit of a sell-off there. And the Hang Seng, a lot of turmoil in Hong Kong lately, of course, but the Hang Seng has actually held on remarkably well. The Chinese market was down 1%, just under 1%, but still looking bullish on the short-term chart, with upside targets up around 3%. Looking at the Indian market, the Sensex is back into bullish territory on the short-term chart. Again, lots of long-term upside targets, still looking pretty good all round. And the Aussie market was up 0.5% overnight, holding on to its gains and all-time highs there. Brent crude is up to 62.63. It has really fallen away this week. We're as high as $66. We've come right the way back, putting us back into bearish territory on all three time frames. We are into the weakest time of year now for Brent, for crude oil, so we shouldn't be surprised to see that the summer driving season over, and we're seeing that sell off there, and we're seeing that showing through on WTI as well. US nat gas sitting at $2.24, just really in the doldrums. It's just been steadily weakening this year, so no change there really. Gold recovering quite strongly. It fell back below $1,400 this morning. Yesterday we're up 2%, and this morning we're up another 0.5%. So we are seeing gold having fallen away, now just really running again. And that means we've got upside targets on the short-term chart. 1434, that would be a new high. 1537, that's obviously a lot higher. And these three targets now are really very much in train. So gold is looking very positive for a long-term breakout and a run. Silver also looking pretty good. US 10-year yields just still pretty weak. We're back below the 2% level now, sitting at 1.95%. Hard to believe that we were looking at 4% potential here only just a year ago, and we had rates above 3% at one stage, but we're now seeing the yield here down at 1.95%. So that 2% level pretty much gone. 189 is the next target. We've got 178 on the medium-term chart and 166 on the long-term chart. So really seeing some quite big moves potentially there. Taking a look at that data all coming to you from Thomson Reuters Icon or Metastock Zenith. Now taking a look at the individual stocks. Here I'm using Yahoo Finance. So first of all, just taking a look at the Dow 30. Verizon were the best performer yesterday, up 2.5%. Cisco were up 2%. And we saw the worst performers tending to be in the industrials. Chevron were down 1.5%, and still underperforming the Dow Jones Index by a few percent this year, but on the whole has been following the market when we look at the relative there. Taking a look at the Nasdaq, we saw here the best performers were Checkpoint Software. They were up 3%. But if we look at the across the board, we saw most tech stocks rising. Looking at the downside, we had Zindex down nearly 3%. There were still stocks falling 2 and 3%. So we have seen even Nvidia, star performer last year, falling away there. They were down 2.4% as well, just really struggling to recover, having fallen away there. Taking a look at the Aussie market, the best performer there was New Farm. They were up 7%. So quite significant move there, but the chart is still looking pretty bearish. On the downside, we had Speedcast International down a massive 16.5%, really falling away there. We had Beachhead Energy, Pilbara Minerals, they were all down as well. We're seeing really big falls on Speedcast there, having had these falls last year, just further falls to come. The Indian market, looking at the Sensex, we had Gale India were the worst performer. They were down 2%. And Ica Motors were down by a similar amount. So we are still seeing, even though the Indian market looks strong, we are still seeing some pretty negative charts here. Here we see the relative to the Dow and Ica Motors. They've underperformed the Dow by 25% this year. Looking at the upside, we had in Industrial Bank Limited. They've had a pretty rocky road for the last year, but they were the best performer yesterday, overnight up 3.7%. India Bulls Housing, we often see either the biggest faller or the biggest riser. They were up 3%. Here we see the live pricing coming in from Yahoo Finance. Taking a look at the FTSE 100 this morning. So we start by looking at the worst performers, Sainsbury's. They've come out with disappointing results this morning. They're down nearly 2%. And we're seeing, of course, supermarkets falling in sympathy here. We see Morrison's, Tesco's all joining there. Sainsbury's have underperformed the Dow Jones Index by 35% so far this year, so really significant there, and quite a big fall from grace from the sort of 350 area down to 195, so quite a big move there. The best performer today, Rentokil Initial, they're up 2.4%. But interestingly, we're just seeing that Sainsbury's renticle chart looks absolutely fantastic with good upside targets still in place. Looking at the mid caps in the UK, all we have to do here is Funding Circle. They were the worst performer yesterday by a country mile, really falling away. Just diving. We're seeing a bit of a relief rally this morning. They've underperformed the market by some 70% this year, so they really have been hit. JD Sports, they're up 2.8% this morning. That chart's still looking pretty good. And if we look to the downside, we see electric components in the 250. They are down 3.8%. So the worst performer in the 250. Taking a look at Europe now, just quickly, the best performers here, Anchor, Bosch, InBev, the brewer, they're looking pretty strong this morning. And that chart starting to transition into bullish territory, breaking that April high, quite significant there. Most stocks up this morning. If we look just quickly to the downside, we've got the banks really being hit this morning. Societe Generale down 1.4%. Santander down 0.8%. Nearly a lot of these fall as the banks, and we've got slightly the automakers. We see Daimler here, BMW underperforming as well this morning. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.